You want to know what betrayal really looks like? It's not a knife in the back. It's a quiet dinner with people who already decided you don't belong. It's your name disappearing from documents you never saw, while your family tells the world you're just not yourself anymore. This isn't a story about war. It's about what happened after. I came home. About silence, forged papers, and a courtroom where the truth didn't need to scream to win. You'll hear things in this story that don't make sense at first. They're not supposed to. Not until you see the whole picture. So watch closely. Every lie had a purpose. Every shadow hid a choice. And every move I made was for the truth. If you're still here by the end, you'll understand why I couldn't stay silent. And maybe you'll ask yourself, what would you do if your own family tried to erase you? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. I read them all, even the ones that hurt. My name is Caitlyn Hart. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in Springfield, Illinois. I served 14 years in the United States Army, intelligence and fieldwork mostly. I've been to places that no longer exist on maps and have seen faces I still remember in my sleep. People talk about coming home like it's a return to something soft, a warm bed, the smell of coffee in the morning, a familiar knock on the door. That wasn't my homecoming. When I came back, the house I remembered was still standing, the walls still painted the same dull cream my mother insisted made things feel bigger. But everything inside had changed, subtly, as if someone had rearranged the furniture of reality just enough to make you question your memory. It started with a voicemail from my mother the night before I landed in Chicago. Her voice was clipped, polite, like she was talking to a banker, not her daughter. Caitlyn, just letting you know we might not be home when you get in. Your brother's had a rough week. We're trying to help him get back on his feet. Call us when you land. I hadn't spoken to Zach, my younger brother, in nearly a year. We were never close. He'd always wanted something bigger than he was willing to earn, bouncing from one get-rich-quick scheme to another. I always figured he'd either hit it big or go down in flames. I just never thought he'd take anyone with him. When I arrived, no one was at the house. My key still worked. The inside smelled of lemon polish and something faintly sour, like old food or spoiled milk. A few things were missing. The framed family photo from 2003, the old vase I broke when I was 10, and my father glued back together. But I didn't think much of it. Not then. I dropped my duffel in my childhood room. The posters were gone, replaced with blank beige walls. My army medals were still in the shadow box on the shelf, but everything else had been boxed up, like someone was planning to move me out, or erase me. I called my mom. No answer. Same with my dad. Finally, Zach picked up. His voice was casual, almost cheerful. Hey sis, you're home. Yeah, where is everyone? Busy. You kinda came at a weird time. It's been 3 years, Zach. Yeah. Listen, can we catch up later? Things are complicated right now. He hung up before I could ask anything more. Over the next few days, I started noticing things. My name had disappeared from the family trust documents. Letters from our parents' lawyer were addressed only to Zach and his wife, Melissa. Bank statements for accounts I used to manage were redirected. When I confronted my parents, they didn't yell. They didn't deny it either. They spoke in slow, careful tones. Words like concerned, fragile mental state, combat trauma, drifted through the air like smoke. My mother looked at me like I was a guest. My father couldn't meet my eyes. I asked them outright, "Are you saying I'm not mentally fit? That I'm unstable?" My father cleared his throat. "We're just trying to make sure everything is safe. For everyone." "Everyone but me," I said. They said I needed rest. That maybe I should take some time away from legal responsibilities. That it was only temporary. But I've worked too many interrogations not to hear the lie in a calm voice. A week later, I was served papers. They were seeking guardianship over my assets, claiming I wasn't mentally competent due to PTSD. They cited anonymous testimonies, questionable medical notes I'd never seen, and financial concerns. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I didn't even fight back. Not yet, because something was off. Not just emotionally, tactically. The paperwork was too precise, the timing too clean. Someone had been planning this for a long time, and it wasn't just about money, it was about erasing me. The court date came faster than I expected. They filed an emergency petition citing immediate financial risk and psychological instability. I was assigned a court-appointed psychiatrist, whom I met exactly once, for less than 20 minutes. He asked about nightmares, about guns, about loss. I didn't tell him about the boy I carried on my back through 3 miles of desert heat while his femur pierced through his skin. Or the girl in Afghanistan who handed me a bag of rice that turned out to be plastic explosives. Or the moments I spent staring at a photo of my family between missions, reminding myself what I was doing this for. Instead, I said I was fine. He nodded, took notes, never looked me in the eye. At the hearing, I sat across from my own family, like a stranger. My mother wore her Sunday pearls. My father sat stiff and silent beside her, and Zach kept his head low, as if the courtroom lighting was too bright. Melissa never looked away from me, calm, composed, like she was waiting for me to lose control. She always did like playing chess while everyone else thought they were tossing dice. Their attorney, someone I didn't recognize, spoke with the oily confidence of someone used to twisting the truth into something sellable. He referenced the psychiatric report. He used phrases like military-grade detachment, potential volatility, and exhibited emotional suppression consistent with trauma survivors. They were building a version of me I didn't recognize. A shell, a shadow, a threat. I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't want to, but because I could feel the trap. One outburst, one crack in my voice, and I'd confirm everything they claimed. Let them play their game. I watched as document after document was submitted. Financial reports I'd never seen. Power of attorney forms with my signature that I knew I never signed. I studied every sheet, every number. Something was off. Repeated patterns in transaction dates. Identical initials on supposedly different documents. Identical formatting down to the font size. Too clean. Too rehearsed. After court, I walked out alone. No one followed me. No one spoke to me. Not even my mother. But as I stepped into the cold Illinois air, something in me clicked. The kind of clarity that only comes when you're surrounded by fog long enough to stop fearing it. This wasn't about concern. This wasn't about trauma. This was a heist. A quiet, well-dressed, well-staged robbery, wearing the mask of family. That night, I went through every document they'd submitted. The paper trail didn't add up. One document showed a signature from me dated 6 months prior. But I was deployed at the time, and I had access logs to prove it. Another was notarized in a city I hadn't set foot in for 5 years. They thought I wouldn't notice. They forgot what I was trained to see. I made 3 phone calls. One to a woman named Marie Green, a private investigator I'd once saved from an ambush in Kandahar. Another to Anthony Morales, a cyber intelligence analyst who owed me a favor he never paid back. And the third, to a number I hadn't dialed in over a decade, connected to a federal contact whose name I still don't speak out loud. Within 72 hours, I had what I needed. A list of companies, all registered to the same P.O. box in Delaware. A common shell address. One of them was Hart Veterans Recovery Trust, a name I'd never heard before, using my image on its homepage and claiming I was its founder. Another was Civic Horizons Foundation, supposedly run by Melissa. According to the IRS, both had received generous government contracts and private donations, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more, all linked to causes involving veterans with mental illness. I checked their banking activity. Funds moved in large chunks. Withdrawals followed within days. Then, nothing. Vanished. Melissa was a former attorney. Zach had access to my old credentials from when I listed him as an emergency contact on base. And the signatures? Traced from scanned copies of deployment forms, doctored just enough to hold up at a glance. I started connecting threads. Slowly, quietly. They thought I'd collapse under the emotional weight, that I'd be too proud to ask for help. Instead, I did what I always did best. I went silent. I planned. I began recording phone calls. I tracked vehicle plates parked outside my apartment more than once. I ran data sweeps for malware on my phone and laptop. And I found it. A keylogger buried in an app I'd downloaded weeks earlier, recommended by Melissa during a casual conversation over dinner. It had been transmitting my keystrokes to an unknown server. One evening, while I was reviewing logs, I got a call from a blocked number. I answered. There was silence for several seconds, and then, "You were supposed to stay gone." The voice was distorted, low, artificial. Before I could speak, the line cut off. They were watching me. Not just family, someone else. Something deeper was tangled in this, and I'd just started pulling the thread. The silence after that call wasn't empty. It was electric. It clung to the walls, lingered in corners, turned the mundane into something menacing. I started sleeping with a light on, something I hadn't done since my first month in the barracks at Fort Jackson. But this wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was awareness. The kind that settles in your bones after years of needing to know who's behind you in the dark. I tightened my routines, changed phones, used burner accounts. I stopped driving the same routes twice. Every detail mattered now. This wasn't just about being careful. It was about staying one step ahead of people who already thought they'd won. Marie, the private investigator, had been digging quietly. She called from a secure line and said 5 words that made my spine lock. "I found something. You need to see it." We met outside a storage unit in a warehouse district near Decatur. Inside was a box, plain, unmarked, except for a strip of red tape on one corner. Marie didn't tell me where she got it. I didn't ask. Inside the box, a burner phone with one number saved. 3 sealed envelopes, marked with old Army clearance codes, and a hard drive labeled Blackgate Transcripts, Phase 3. I connected the hard drive to an offline laptop Morales had scrubbed. Inside were folders, encrypted at first glance, but someone had gotten sloppy, or overconfident. Morales broke through the second layer of security in under 6 minutes. The contents stopped us both cold. Financial ledgers, not just from the fake charities Melissa set up, but from at least 9 other entities, all tied to veterans' benefits, PTSD treatment funds, even suicide prevention grants. They weren't just stealing money, they were manufacturing identities. Some of the names listed were men and women I served with. Some were dead. Others were still active duty. All of them had their information duplicated, twisted, and filed through the same network of shell companies and foundations. There were email chains, names of donors, invoices routed through defense contractors. This wasn't just Zach and Melissa anymore. This was federal. This was organized. And my family, at least part of them, were the camouflage. I remember staring at one document in particular, a fund transfer of $75,000 labeled as Grief Outreach Development, routed from Heart Veterans Recovery Trust to a company in Virginia. The name on the invoice was mine, and the signature? Almost perfect. But I'd never use a capital C like that. Melissa always did. I realized now why they needed me gone, Why they were so careful not to accuse me of anything criminal, just unwell, unreliable, mentally compromised. If I started asking the wrong questions, the whole structure might crack. And worse, they knew I could prove it. I sat in the dark that night for a long time, letting it all circle me. The years I'd served, the silence I carried back home, the people I'd trusted, not just my family, but the system I thought I was part of. And then came the final click. Melissa wasn't the architect. She was the technician. She'd had help. Someone with access, with legal leverage, with reach. That someone might have been my father. He used to work for a subcontractor in defense logistics. Nothing high level, mostly local, but he always seemed to know more than he said. Quiet, methodical. A man who read the fine print on his junk mail. I remembered a moment, maybe 2 years before I left for my final deployment. I came home unexpectedly, walked into the kitchen, and found him burning a stack of papers in the fireplace, all printed emails. He looked startled, covered it up with a story about old bills. I believed him. Now I wasn't so sure. The phone rang again that night. Same blocked number. I let it ring out. 3 minutes later, a text came through from a different number. "You're getting close. Walk away." I didn't respond. Instead, I made a copy of everything we'd found and delivered it, by hand, to an old contact. A federal agent named Thomas Ryland, someone I'd worked with years ago on an internal corruption probe in Kandahar. Ryland didn't ask questions. He took the drive, nodded, and said only, "If this is what I think it is, you won't be the only one going down. Be ready." Be ready. As if I'd ever stopped. 3 days later, my father showed up at my door. He looked thinner, eyes hollow, shirt collar rumpled, like he hadn't slept. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood there, quiet. "We didn't want this," he said eventually. "Then why did you do it?" "You left. You became someone else. You came back. And you weren't her anymore. So you tried to erase me?" "We were protecting what was left. Zach. He couldn't survive like you. He needed a place in this world. You already had yours." I didn't answer him. I watched his face, the lines that told a different story than the words. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he added. "Then stop it. It's not that simple anymore." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Don't trust anyone, even the ones who helped you, especially them." And just like that, he walked into the night. I stood there, door half open, wondering if I'd just spoken to a guilty man, or a warning dressed like one. The courtroom felt colder than I remembered. Not physically. The air was still heavy with that recycled government building stillness, but something else. An emotional frost that had settled over everyone in the room. Faces I once loved were now masked in control. Fear. Defensiveness. Melissa sat near the front, calm as ever. One leg crossed over the other, a pen twirling between her fingers like she was at a conference, not a reckoning. Zach sat beside her, stiff and pale, his jaw twitching every time someone spoke his name. My parents were across the aisle, dressed with quiet precision, like they hoped proper clothing might dull the shame. No one looked at me. I didn't need them to. The judge called my name. I stood, walked forward. No emotion, no outburst. Just a single manila folder in my hand, the one Marie and Morales had helped me put together. No legal team, no theatrics. Just truth. I said no opening statement, no long explanation. Instead, I handed the folder to the clerk and looked the judge in the eye. "Everything you need is in there," I said. There was a long silence. Pages turned, pens scratched, brows furrowed. Then the judge leaned back, handed the folder to a federal marshal, and gave one quiet nod. 2 seconds later, 3 men in plain suits entered the courtroom. No warning, no announcement, just motion. Melissa noticed them first. Her pen froze in mid-spin. Zach turned to her. She said something under her breath. One of the men approached them, reached into his jacket, and produced cuffs. Gasps filled the room. Chairs scraped. My father stood halfway up before a voice snapped, "Sir, sit down." The judge banged the gavel once. "This court is now under federal review. All parties will remain seated until further notice." I didn't smile. There was no rush of victory. Just silence. The kind that carries weight. Melissa was let out first. Still composed. Still trying to calculate a way out. But her eyes flicked toward me just once, and for the first time, I saw something behind them. Not anger. Not even guilt. Fear. Zach followed her, shoulders hunched, muttering something that sounded like denial. My parents didn't move. My mother covered her mouth with one hand. My father stared at the floor. The proceedings blurred after that. Lawyers moved in and out. The court was cleared. Investigators began issuing statements. The media would catch on within a week. But by then, most of it would be sealed. Rylan met me outside, in the gray light of late afternoon. "We'll handle the rest," he said. "They were going to get away with it," I answered. "They always do," he said, "until someone like you doesn't let them." I went home that night to silence, not relief, not grief, just stillness. A kind of peace that wasn't soft, but solid, unshakable. In the following months, I didn't answer interview requests. I ignored social media. I stayed out of headlines. I wasn't interested in being a story. I'd had enough of being used as one. Instead, I built something, a foundation. Small at first, quiet, no corporate sponsors, no fanfare. Just a mailing address, a battered laptop, and a mission: to find and help veterans whose names had been used, erased, or sold. The way mine almost was. We called it the Heartline, a quiet nod to what I kept, not what I lost. Letters started coming in, from people I'd never met. People who had no proof, no case, but a feeling that something wasn't right. I read every one. Some I could help, others I couldn't. But they all mattered. One morning, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Me, in uniform, standing on a ridge overseas, taken years ago. Behind me, Zach smiling. The back of the photo was blank, except for a single line in unfamiliar handwriting. "I was there too. You never saw me, but you saved me anyway." I didn't know who sent it, but it didn't matter. We don't always get to know who we help. Just like we don't always see who betrays us until it's too late. But some things, once uncovered, can never go back into shadow. When I think about that day in court, I don't remember the handcuffs, or the silence, or even the look on my family's faces. I remember the sound of one paper being placed on a desk. Just one. That's all it took. Because in the end, truth doesn't need to shout. It waits. It endures. And when the time is right, it walks in. Quiet, unshaken, and undeniable.